September 21st of 2022, Executive Council, Council Chamber, State House, Boston, Mass. Dear Councilors, I'm pleased to nominate Gloriann Moroney to the position of Associate Justice in the District Court. I submit the nomination for the advice and consent of the Executive Council pursuant to Part 2, Chapter 2 of the Constitution of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. I'm enclosing the nominee's resume for your convenience. Sincerely, Charles D. Baker. The vice is the Honorable Mary L. Amrine. So we have people speaking, I believe, in support and against. And I'm going to give each witness 3 minutes and to say what they want to say. And we'll start with the Honorable Holly Broadbent. To see you, Judge.
As well. Members of the Governor's Council, good morning. For those of you I have not met, my name is Holly Broadbent, and I'm a judge sitting in the Lawrence District Court. I'm truly happy to speak on Gloriann's behalf today, as she was not only my colleague for many years, but she is also my friend. My relationship with Gloriann began in 2002 when she joined the Suffolk District Attorney's Office, and I became her supervisor in 2006 when she joined the Domestic Violence and Sexual Assault Unit. In that capacity, I not only observed Gloriann while she was on trial, but actually tried cases with her. I know the council's had a chance to review the types of cases she's tried. Gloriann gained a reputation as a highly effective and well-prepared trial lawyer. She approached every case with the same principles in mind: to seek justice for victims, many of whom were the most fragile or vulnerable, to treat defendants, even those charged with the most heinous and almost unthinkable crimes, with the utmost fairness and compassion, and to represent the Commonwealth with the highest degree of ethics and fairness. Gloriann worked tirelessly to make thoughtful and careful sentencing recommendations that reflected not only a thorough consideration of the impact of the crime on the victim and the safety of the community, but also of the offender in any mitigating circumstances. These are the very same principles district court judges must apply to be effective in their job. Gloriann also became the chief of the Superior Court Child Abuse Unit in 2012, and as a supervisor, she was supportive and patient with them, but she also had the ability to offer them straightforward, constructive criticism, and they respected Gloriann for that. In my opinion, Gloriann's experience in handling the most complex and serious criminal investigations and trials, sexual assault and child abuse, make her uniquely qualified to be a district court judge. Because often those types of criminal investigations end with having to tell a victim that their case cannot be prosecuted for a variety of reasons. That experience and judgment would serve her well in the district court, where decisions often have to be made swiftly and to the disappointment of litigants. I firmly believe that if Gloriann is confirmed as a district court judge, she will be the kind of judge that the people of the Commonwealth would want on the bench, because she will make decisions that are fair and informed and supported by the merits of each individual case. I truly believe that Gloriann will always strive to do just that. Thank you for your time, councilors.
Thank you very much. Any questions?
Thank you, Judge.
Thank you.
Next, we will have the Honorable Michael Doolin.
3 minutes.
3 minutes.
Good morning, everyone, and it's an honor to be back here in front of the Governor's Council testifying for Gloriann Moroney, who I've known since the first day she was a lawyer. Gloriann came into Dorchester District Court over 20 years ago, and I had the privilege of getting to know her both as an attorney and a person, and having gotten to meet her husband, Greg, as well. And she's just been a real great example of someone who has really come along in the court system and has just so many good qualities. I handled so many cases against her in the Dorchester Court and also in the Superior Court. She was always fair, approachable, open to suggestion, open-minded. She saw both sides of an issue. She's a great communicator. She was very fair and a good person. And I think the fundamental fairness and decency that she has as a human being, she'll bring to the bench. She was a very, very good trial attorney. She has experience, over 20 years of coming into court every day and trying cases. She's a good listener. She has great patience. She has a great demeanor. I think she's going to be a tremendous judge. Thank you for the opportunity to come here and tell you everything that I know about Gloriann, which is all exemplary.
We appreciate it. Any questions of Judge Doolin?
Thank you.
Thank you very much. So that's the witnesses in favor, witnesses against. I think I have the list here. Patty Guerin. He's what?
Hello. Can
He's
you
on
hear
Zoom.
me?
Okay. Patty, you're on Zoom. You got 3 minutes.
All right. I wish I'd known ahead of time. I've got an awful lot to say, but here goes. I'm going to forget all the intro stuff and go right to some issues. My view is that Ms. Moroney has created a very dysfunctional parole board. I'm just going to give you a very few examples quickly. She made promises of what she was going to do on the board, improve commutations. Guess what? That didn't happen. We've had 2 commutations since she's been on there. 2 out of all of the many petitions that have been filed. She made promises to improve the termination procedure. Guess what? That didn't happen. Termination procedure, there's been 2 people who have had their paroles terminated out of the many people who were over sentenced during the 80s and 90s in our crackdown on crime. These are people who've been under parole supervision for decades doing excellent behavior and have been turned down. The board was sued over it, but the board said they would draft a regulation to try to control it. The regulation that was drafted is horrific. There was a public hearing 2 weeks ago. Plenty of people who are on parole showed up and testified against it, why it won't work. Lawyers testified against it. I can't imagine the parole board's going to do anything except publish the policy that they've got, and it's not working. The parole votes, I'm sure you're going to hear Ms. Moroney tell you that her parole votes are high and have gone up in the past year. That might be. I'm operating under the statistics that are published in the annual report from 2020, and that shows the opposite. The overall parole rate in 2020 was 46%, according to the published reports. That is down from the year before when it was 54, down from the year before in 2018 when it was 56, down from the year before that in 2017 when it was 52. The same thing occurs in the House of Corrections statistics and the release hearing statistics. Now, I have no doubt that her parole rate has gone up in the past year. She has been trying to get decisions out more quickly after stalling and getting them out for her whole tenure. She has been working to get things done, but I'm not sure what the motivation is because it lines up with her campaigning to become a judge. And that is a little bit troubling to think about. The length of time it takes to get decisions out, to me, speaks volumes about somebody who does not care or respect the clients that appear in front of her. The fact that it is taking a year to get negative decisions out, and it was just that bad when she took over. I'm pointing out to you that when Dr. Charlene Bonner was chair, decisions got out in 60 days. 60 days. She made up all the behind decisions from Paul Tressler, and she got them out in 60 days, which is what the statute anticipates. Negative lifer decisions take close to a year, 9 to 12 months to get out. Positive decisions now get out in
Excuse me,
4 to 5 months.
Patty. Patty, can you
Yes.
just wrap it up, please?
All right, positive decisions take 4 to 5 months. I can give you examples if you want to ask me about what that's done to people, the disrespect that it shows to people. My very last comment is the morale at the parole board. It is horrific. You heard about it from Colette Santa. That all comes from the top down. The morale could not be worse there. I
Thank
urge
you.
you to not vote Gloriann to be a judge. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, we'll hear from Lisa Berland.
The handout. Well, I'm going to have to speak very fast.
Okay, you ready?
We have 5 minutes, but we were told we were only going to have 3. My name is Lisa Broland. I'm a member of Parole Watch, as you know. I'd like to start out by going back to Ms. Moroney's testimony at her hearing to become a member of the Parole Board on January 9th, 2019. At her hearing, Ms. Moroney testified, quote, "Due to criminal justice reform, this agency is being revolutionized and I want to be part of it. I have assisted the agency in getting prepared to implement the criminal justice reform. A lot of this will change the face of parole and I want to be part of that." Ms. Moroney was approved by the council and 3 months later became chair. Unfortunately, rather than improving the parole process, Ms. Moroney has done the opposite. I want to focus on the published decisions as indicative of her disregard for the incarcerated as well as a profound lack of managerial skills. As a member of Parole Watch, in addition to observing hearings, we review published decisions for data to help analyze the process. As chair, Ms. Moroney oversees the agency and is ultimately responsible for the timing, quality, and content of decisions. At Ms. Moroney's hearing in 2019, she was pressed on the length of time the decisions were taking. Under previous chairs, decisions were, as Patty noted, 60 days. According to her testimony, decisions in January 19 were taking 7 to 8 months. However, she reported she had just hired an additional attorney who would be focused solely on writing decisions. Thus, she assured the council the length of time would be reduced. However, for the year 2019, the time between hearing and decision actually got longer, 9 months, not an improvement. In 2020, with COVID, abbreviated decisions were introduced to expedite releases. The average time between hearings was reduced to about 7 months. However, that obscures the fact that the positive decisions were taking less time, about 6 months. Negative decisions were taking longer, on average 8 months. For this year and the previous year, negative decisions are even taking longer, 9.5 months on average, while positive are 5 to 6 months. But what about the content of the decisions? In her testimony, Ms. Moroney maintained that decisions were 3 to 5 pages long. This is definitely not the case. The decisions are typically 2 to 5 pages. Abbreviated decisions are 1.5 pages. A negative decision consists of a summary of the case, a summary of the hearing, and then the actual decision, which is only 2 paragraphs, one of which is boilerplate about standards used to assess readiness. The other consists of a few sentences which may or may not include recommendations to the parole applicant. The recommendations to the parole applicants are notable for their genericness and lack of specificity. For today's hearing, I reviewed all the negative decisions published so far in 22, of which there are 15, and I included them in the handout to you guys. Here are 2 typical examples of recommendations. Quote, "He is encouraged to remain disciplinary report free. He should pursue all recommended treatment and programming and maintain an overall positive adjustment." End quote. That's the recommendation. Another example, quote, "The board has concerns that he lacks insight into his crime and encourages him to seek help in this area and to continue with programs and maintaining a positive adjustment." End quote. This lack of data provides,
Sorry, you got to wrap it up.
all right, I'm trying. This lack of clarity provided to the parole applicant who has to prepare for the next hearing has been emphasized by lifers in Norfolk. Gordon Haas, the chair of the group, released its annual report on parole in April 22, which analyzes parole data. In this report, Mr. Haas made special note of the lack of direction and decision.
Excuse me, I'm going to have to cut you off. 3 minutes are up, okay?
Thank you.
Let you go beyond that.
Point of information, there is no time limit on people who are testifying.
Next witness is Catherine Hadley.
Does anybody have any questions for me?
Yeah, I would.
Catherine Hadley, please.
Okay.
You're doing the hearing.
Wait a minute. I'm running a hearing.
I'm not allowed to ask you any
Okay.
questions.
No, you got a question to ask, you can ask it.
First of all, there was 100 commutations and only 2 came through.
Petitions, correct.
Petitions. Okay, so tell us what happens to those 98 people.
Well, but I actually don't know. Because I'm just seeing what's published, but I would assume that they don't get a response. So they put in a petition and there's no response.
They have to reapply probably.
Yeah, but years later, like Ramadan Shabazz.
Tell me, all right, here's a question I want to ask before he what is the difference between Chair Bonner and his chair as far as, you know, how it was run and how commutations were presented in times and people were.
Well, I mean, as we know from Bonner, he got the decisions out in 60 days. Other than that, I was not on parole watch when Bonner was chair, so I can't really speak to that.
Well, I thank you for coming, and we don't have any time limit. I'm timed.
Thank you very much. Catherine Hadley, please. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Okay, you got 3 minutes. Thank you.
It's Katrina Hadley. I'm testifying in opposition to Ms. Moroney's nomination to the Brockton District Court. I'm a member of Parole Watch, a citizen concerned about mass incarceration. I personally have people dear to me who are currently and have been previously incarcerated, including a loved one serving life without parole. I'm testifying in opposition because as a member of Parole Watch, I feel compelled to express my feeling that based on my observations and data collected by Parole Watch, that the parole board lacks leadership and proper management. And this is a very negative impact on the parole process and especially the parole applicants. The following are some examples. During COVID, many things were immediately thrown into a situation that required quick changes to systems and protocols. The parole agency, of course, was no exception. Public hearings for lifers quickly had to be reorganized to keep all participants safe, at the same time ensuring a smooth and fair process for parole applicants, victims, and supporters, as well as providing public access. Leadership was required to undertake this challenging task. This is not what occurred. Lifer parole hearings throughout COVID were characterized by numerous and ongoing issues, including terrible audio quality, dropped connections, the inability of the public to view the proceedings. Interested parties were only allowed to dial in and listen to audio. Frequent inability of supporters and victims to connect to the WebEx. Frequent inability of the interested party to even know who was speaking. Parole Watch actively recorded these issues. Further, there was no improvement during the year that these hearings were held remotely, even after numerous complaints. They were bad at the start and bad at the end. This poor implementation of COVID protocols in the lifer parole process points directly at Ms. Moroney's lack of leadership and poor management, but it also shows a profound disregard how this poor technology impacted the parole applicants, making an already difficult, stressful situation even more so. Ms. Moroney could have and should have done more to resolve these issues. Another issue the Parole Watch noted that speaks to Ms. Moroney's lack of leadership, and I would say lack of engagement, is the fact that she only acted as the lead questioner 3 times out of 130 lifer hearings observed by Parole Watch. The lead questioner at lifer hearings is the board member who reads the file, reviews the case closely, is tasked with asking the most questions at the hearing, and taking the lead in terms of assessing the parole applicant's suitability for parole. Lastly, but not least, poor morale at the parole board has been extensively documented. This issue was reported by Jean Traunstein in her article In Depth on May 23rd, 2020. It's again raised by testimony at the hearing for collect sample in all. Ms. Traunstein reported that the current and former parole agency employees characterized the agency as a repressive environment, rife with retaliation and nepotism, and detailed specific examples of poor management, too numerous to mention here. This council was made directly aware of some of these issues from calls and letters you received leading up to the renomination hearing. Being a judge is a position of great leadership and great responsibility, requiring managing a courtroom and a criminal legal process where the stakes are so high. There's little in Ms. Moroney's tenure at the parole board that suggests that she has the leadership skills, management skills, or the temperament to be a good judge.
Thank you very much. Got it.
You to vote.
Thank you. Laura Wyman.
My name is Laura Wyman, and I'm a member of Parole Watch and a citizen concerned about mass incarceration and an advocate for reform of the criminal legal system. I'd also like to touch on Ms. Moroney's hearing in January of 2019, in which she asserted that she was eager to revolutionize the parole board. I want to talk about a key area where she could have demonstrated her commitment to reform but failed to do so. This failure speaks to a lack of leadership, lack of commitment to criminal justice reform, as well as a lack of respect for the incarcerated. I'm talking about commutations. Commutations are a key element of criminal justice reform. At every hearing before this council for parole board nominations, it has been raised by members of this council as a critical issue. Ms. Moroney was specifically asked at her hearing whether she believed in commutations. She answered affirmatively. However, she has taken no leadership role here. As chair of the board, she has neglected to move forward in this key area by failing to take up commutation petitions. Only 4 commutation hearings have been held during her tenure of roughly 3.5 years as chair, out of more than 100 filed. We don't have an exact number on the commutation petitions filed, as that information is not readily available. Out of the 4, 2 commutations were approved by the parole board. The 4th commutation hearing was held on July 26th of this year for Ramadan Shabazz. I attended this hearing, and the parole board members participating were overwhelmingly supportive throughout the questioning. Yet, 2.5 months later, has a decision been made? Has a vote been taken on the parole board for the commutation? We don't know, because no commutation decisions are posted on the parole board website. All we know is that the recommendation has not yet made it to the governor. So again, where is the leadership needed to move this case along? Where's the consideration and respect for someone who has been incarcerated for over 50 years and eagerly awaiting a decision on his hearing? Further, it was necessary for Ms. Moroney to recuse herself from Mr. Shabazz's hearing, as it was a Suffolk case, which brings me to another troubling aspect of Ms. Moroney's tenure at the parole board. When Ms. Moroney's husband became acting commissioner of the Boston Police Department in early February 2021, Ms. Moroney did not initially recuse herself from lifer hearings for Suffolk cases. Only after pressure was brought to bear did she do so. However, there was never any official announcement regarding her new policy, and she never explained.
3 minutes. Excuse me, ma'am. Excuse me, your 3 minutes. Thank you.
Right. Let me have a few more seconds to wrap up. This left a big gap in the parole board, and I could say more about that, but I'm being told I don't have the time. Ethics and appearance of conflict of interest are critical considerations for a judge. Leadership and management skills are also important qualifications. I would also add commitment to fairness in the justice system and respect for and ability to work with criminal defendants. And for the examples I've given and for others raised by other folks at this hearing, I don't believe she's demonstrated those at the parole board.
Thank you.
Any questions?
I'll ask if there's any questions. Excuse me.
And I apologize because you.
Excuse me. Excuse me.
Statements.
Excuse me.
It's a disgrace that you're not allowed to read.
Excuse me.
That's all I have to say.
Thank you. I don't believe we have any other witnesses, either for or against, going to speak.
Mr. Chair, I would ask that their full statements, if they haven't been writing, be put into the record.
Definitely, absolutely. If you leave them here, we'll make sure they're in the record. With that, we'll hear from you.
Everyone, I'm honored and humbled to be before you. I want to thank the members of the Governor's Council for the opportunity to appear today and for devoting your time to me during the days and hours leading up to today's hearing. Thank you to Councilor Jubinville for hosting this hearing today. I want to say thank you to Governor Baker and Lieutenant Governor Polito for nominating me to the position of Associate Justice of the District Court. And thank you for having the faith and confidence in me to take on this incredible responsibility. I want to thank the Judicial Nominating Commission and the Joint Bar for their work and for their time and effort in reviewing the application. Thank you so very much to Robert Ross, Lauren Green Petrigno, Emily Gauthier, Katie Babin, and Valerie McCarthy for all of their support and guidance throughout my application process. I am here today with my husband, Greg, who is a constant source of encouragement and support. Greg and I met when we began law school in 1997. He's a member of the Boston Police Department for 26 years. We've been married for 19 years, and we are the proud parents of two amazing children. They are 17 and 14 years old. We live in Canton, where we're active in our church, our schools, and our community. Both my husband and I have shared a commitment to public service and this commitment to the citizens of the Commonwealth, and we have always tried to instill in our children the importance of giving back to the community. As you know, I'm also here with the Honorable Holly Broadbent, Associate Justice of the District Court, and the Honorable Michael Doolin, Associate Justice of the Superior Court. They are outstanding professionals and jurists who have been true friends and mentors to me for many years. I'm so grateful for their support and to have them here next to me to testify on my behalf. As I sit before you today, I believe I have the professional and personal skills that would make me an excellent fit for the District Court bench. My extensive and unique background have prepared me well for this role should I be confirmed. After 20 years of experience as an assistant district attorney, general counsel, parole board member, and chairwoman, I am confident that I have the qualifications, demeanor, and character needed to be a judge who impacts the community. The district court is a court of the people and a place where lives are greatly impacted for everyone who enters its doors. It's a place where people seek safety or simply the chance to be heard. I truly believe in the difference that the district court can make in the trajectory of people's lives, especially as it relates to rehabilitative treatment and programming and other alternative dispositions. I take great pride in the fact that throughout my professional experiences, I have served the citizens of the Commonwealth and impacted many lives. There is no greater or more honorable way to serve the Commonwealth than as a judge, and if confirmed, I will continue impacting the lives of all those who serve the district court. Grateful and humbled to be here today, and I'm ready for your questions.
Thank you very much. Before we start with the questions for the councilors, I just want to put in the record letters that we received on your behalf. I won't read them. They'll be in the record for anybody that wishes to review them. And there's one from John McGann from the Gavin Foundation, James Stanton, a judge in the BMC, John Garland, a judge in the BMC, Janice R. Doyle, has been employed by the Massachusetts Parole Board for 12 years. Shara Benedetti, Timothy Simmons, who I believe works for the Parole Board. Maureen Flaherty, Angelo Gomez, Catherine Moran, Patrick Hagan, Sydney Hanlon, Jennifer Tweley, John Pappas, Keith, Brenna Flynn, Michael Coelho, and Rosalind Miller. And these letters will all be in the file for anybody that wants to view them. Okay, thank you. Councilor Devaney, 15 minutes starts.
Hello, thank you for your time that you met with me. I appreciate that second time around. First of all, I would like to go back to the hearing that you had. First of all, I just want to say, I believe in open government. I believe that every citizen should have the right in open government in Massachusetts to apply. on a judgeship, okay? I don't believe that it should be working, the administration lobbying people, okay? We had a person that was appointed by 2 former governors. 10 years she served, Lucy Soto Abbey. Outstanding. And besides being outstanding, she's Puerto Rican. She spoke Spanish. She was so respected around Massachusetts, and she was sent everywhere, okay? So, she was held over for a year. You have to go to work every day. That who's gonna replace me? And she was called in the last day of the year in Munich, in the parole office. And she was told, these are your insurance papers. Is that the way we treat people who are outstanding? Now, let's talk about you. Not the way I see it. You were asked by former attorneys of the governor, Povich and Casey, to apply. This wonderful person and for you to apply. That's not my type of government. That's not what I put my hand up to swear to tell the truth and to behold this Massachusetts state government. Now, I remember when you came before me at the hearing. Now, you only got 4 years left in Lucy's term. And I said to you, would you be willing to commit to us today to serve the 4 years? You said no. Then I asked you, would you like to be a judge? You hesitated. Yeah, you were thinking about it or whatever. Now, they threw off this wonderful person. You only had 4 years, and yet in 2 years and 1 month, your application was on the governor's desk for a judgeship. Where's the justice? Where is the justice for Massachusetts, for Lucy, for all of us? And for you, that you were sought. All right? We saw that with the state representative that just got out. Never was at a parole board hearing. Never in 8 years ever presented any legislation, criminal justice, a parole. But he even said here at the hearing, he called a couple of councilors, and in a month he was sitting up there. We've lost wonderful people up there. Now, I'm very investigative. I'm the only full-time here. When you first were appointed to the parole board, sought out people. People were afraid because they didn't know me and they didn't want to lose their job. I found someone who had just retired from the parole department. And she told me that her job was to give you, because you were the counsel for the parole board at that time, and her job was to give you a list of the people who were a long time on parole that qualified for termination of parole. She had 3 pages that she gave you, and she told me you didn't act on one. Is this compassion? Is this fairness? Is this consideration? I don't think so. 100 commutations, and you approved 2. And it's your position as chair to be chairing these, and I don't see it. I saw you at the LIPA hearings, but that we had for the 2 commutations. But for me, I voted no, and I stand by that. And I was so hoping that you would prove me wrong, that you would serve 4 years, but you couldn't do it. And when I met with you, what did I say to you recently? Why didn't you just apply for a judgeship? Why did you use the parole board? And we lost a valuable member. Lucy came from a dangerous area in Springfield and in a public housing where there were rapes and murders. And she even had one of her members of her family life sentence. She was a victim witness advocate when she came here. She had both sides. And she was treated so badly. Not even a thank you for your service. Not even the administration giving her a letter. and you came on and you were asked, and that's what we're doing. We're going out and asking people. I want people who are qualified to get the job. And I can't say, gee, you've done a wonderful job. I'm sure all your colleagues, that's wonderful. That's wonderful. Of course your colleagues are gonna all support you. Do you think one of them would say, no or whatever? But I have seen what's happened in the parole department, and I'm going to have an investigation because we need an investigation for those people that are working there who have no voice. These people working there are being bypassed. You appointed Colette that we just, I didn't vote for it. She got her friend to be the assistant. She got a lot of authority, this Michelle. She failed the civil service exam. She's got the job, she's got authority, and there's other people passed that exam and were bypassed. There's people who are left, people are so unhappy, people are waiting for the other shoe to fall. And I care about people. And when people serve us well, we don't discard them. Say thank you. And those two previous governors saw these people. We had Lee Gartenberg, specialist in parole, and he's still sending me glossary terms as they change. And he's a counsel to the, he was 4 months, and he was thrown off. Charlie Bonner, morale was wonderful when she was a chair. And you were so outstanding. Tell me what you did in 3 months that was so outstanding that the governor would throw off Bonner and put you as chair. I tried to find out what you did in those 3 months that was so spectacular. I mean, these are the things, I'm not a go-along. I never could be, and I never will be. When I was a city councilor, whether I'm a councilor here, I'm for people, I'm for workers. And there's no one out there, they don't have a voice, they're afraid. And then we have the same director that came with misinformation on everything. So tell me, why didn't you just apply for a judgeship? Why did you do this? Why did you, 2 years and 1 month on the governor's desk to be a judge? Why would you do that? You certainly knew you wanted to be a judge when you got the job. Why did you take it?
Are you asking me why I applied to the parole board rather than apply to be a judge in 2019? Is that your question, Counselor?
The question, you know what you said to me at your hearing. Yes, you'd like to be a judge. But why didn't you just apply? You had the votes. You got the votes here. You'll have the votes today. My vote won't count.
I did not apply to be a judge in 2019 because it was my utmost professional desire to become a member of the parole board at the time. At no other time did I ever apply to be a judge than now.
I'm sorry to be so animated. Maybe it's my ethnic background. That's how we are. I have to tell you, I'm heartbroken for the people that we lost. We had a wonderful parole board. And I'm so glad that Tomini and Tina are reappointed. Imagine Tina, 3 years. Her term expired, 3 years she's been waiting. Where is the justice here? And I have no say. People think we have so much say. I have 1 vote, and my vote doesn't count most times, okay? I don't go along. I'm not getting anything good. I'm not getting any goodies. I'm not getting my relatives everywhere. I just want good people on these boards. And when I first got elected, they were all prosecutors on the parole board, and I worked so hard to change it because it was not in compliance since Governor Dukakis, 30 years. And I worked hard, and now we're going backwards. 2 commutations? How do you explain that? How do you explain your performance?
As far as commutations, the commutations and pardons were reviewed, and the numbers are over 300. I believe it's 330 about, and that began in 2019. The review of them as far as preparing them to go to the board. In 2020, the governor issued new guidelines. Upon those guidelines getting issued, every single pardon and commutation was reviewed, provided to the board, and the board All of the board members voted on whether or not the petition merited a hearing, and then if it did, a hearing was conducted. 4 commutation hearings were conducted, 2 of which, as you know, the governor did commute those 2 individuals from first-degree to second-degree murder, and they are currently on parole supervision.
About the percentage of hearings that you preside at, I thought you're supposed to be presiding over all of the hearings. Isn't that how the procedure goes?
I have presided over every commutation or part of
Not
the.
commutation, I'm talking
Oh, I
about.
thought that was your question, Counselor, I'm sorry. I preside over, are you asking about life sentence hearings? Life sentence hearings, I think, are the ones you're talking about,
I'm
Counselor.
talking about hearings.
Well, I can't do every hearing because they're in the.
Been there 2 years, okay, in the hearings I'm talking about. And you know, I really don't think that this was very fair today. These people came in opposition. It's not easy. It's always nice to talk for. I like to talk for. I don't like to talk against. And they came, they took the time and they prepared that statement. And for some reason, they weren't allowed to complete their statements. What are we doing here? Elected for? If I can't represent people to come in here and speak, if you can't speak here, where can you speak? So, you know, I don't know. I mean, I come from a background. My father was an Italian immigrant. They wouldn't let Italians work in Watertown. He had to pretend he wasn't Italian. He changed his name and went to court and changed his name. I went to court 30 years ago and I got his name that he was born with because I grew up with a name that.
Counselor Devaney, thank you. Thank you. Counselor Ianella, please. Counselor Ianella.
Sure. And I'm just saying.
Counselor Ianella, please. Please, please, please. You got rules here. Follow the rules.
A lot of people complain to me that it takes a long time
Let's talk out.
to get,
Point of information. Do we go through the chair?
He was recognized.
excuse me, to get a pardon. So if somebody requests fills out an application to get a pardon, give me the time frame from before it goes positively through your board to get to the governor's office. With this range from 2 months to 8 months, how long does that take?
So for the executive clemency petitions, as the council knows, there has been a backlog. We've worked through that backlog. So today, if a petition is put in, it will get reviewed and processed fairly quickly, probably within about a month, and provided to the board. Unfortunately, it took us some time to get there, as you know, Council.
Moving forward.
Moving forward, we are caught up. Yes.
Today is October 12th. When's the earliest it gets to the governor's office?
Well, that depends on if the board said yes or no to a hearing. Assuming the board says yes to a hearing, and then a hearing is scheduled, and then there needs to be a recommendation, we're probably talking about a few months' time.
Thank you. A lot of people ask me that question. Thank you very much.
Counselor Duff.
Thank you. So, that was a great question. Thank you, Councilor Ianella. Why, when you took over, the decisions were caught up. What caused them to be so backed up? I mean, people have been waiting. The statute is that they should have them, I think, within 3 months. Some people have been waiting almost a year, 9 months, 11 months. For decisions in the past. You know, I know you caught up now, you've applied to be a judge, I know all that. But in the last few years, you've had, how big is your legal staff? How many lawyers?
There are 5, including the general counsel now.
Okay. So that's bigger than there's ever been. And they're writing the decisions, the board members are not. Why is it taking so long with all that? And your decisions are shorter than they've been too. How many pages is the average decision now?
I would say the average denial is about 3 pages. The reduced, well, let me back up and make sure I answer your question. So time frame wise, when I took over as chair, there was certainly, and we're talking about the life sentence decisions, just to clarify, the non-life sentence decisions, I think the council knows, decisions are provided to the individual immediately upon the end of the hearing, so day of. So this is approximately 97% of our hearings are conducted in person. Decision is provided day of hearing to that individual. They are told yes or no as far as the parole decision right away. The life sentence hearings, as the council knows, they're far more complicated. There's a lot of testimony. There is a lot of information. Okay.
Why have they taken so long when you've had more help? Well, that's the thing nobody understands. I have been told by victims' families, they are in such despair. I'm not talking about the person in prison. I'm talking about the victims' families waiting to find out what's going to happen. And nobody seems to care at the agency. It's very odd. I don't understand how you could go from a machine that was running so smoothly to completely not. I mean, how did that, and it happened on your watch. So how did it happen? Or tell me this, what's your management style?
So I would think my management style is pretty hands-on. I do work pretty closely with all of the managers. I work closely, making sure that I'm available to attend managers' meetings. I meet with the managers often. We discuss issues. We try and work out things like this particular issue. This is an issue that is.
What caused this issue?
So when I took over as chair, there was a backlog or a delay in hearings. They do take a long time. They do. They are not.
I'm sorry, you can tell me this, but every single piece of information says that's not true. I mean, everything. The people who work there, the people sitting behind me, the victims' families, you're the only one that says it's true. So what were the conversations you had with the previous chief? Because everything before worked very well when Bonner was there. So what were your conversations with her? What advice did you seek from her?
It was actually now Judge Tressler, who was.
I know it was Tressler, but he was a disaster, and we all know that, okay? To his own admission, from his own mouth, he only looked at one pardon application the whole time he was there. I mean, the man, in my opinion, I didn't vote for him to be chair. I didn't vote for him to be a judge. He's negligent. I think he's dangerous. So I don't want to talk about him. We know he didn't do his job. We know he didn't. We know the last chair that did their job, that had things going out on time, was this Bonner. I think it's his friend. What were your conversations with her?
Are you talking about, I just want to make sure I understand, commutations or life sentence?
About decisions.
Of which,
This isn't hard.
I just want to make sure I answer your question. So it's,
Please.
as far as life sentence hearings, I will tell you that they are the most.
That's not my question. My question is, what were your conversations for advice from the previous chair who was running this agency like clockwork? What advice did you seek from her?
I'm not sure we ever talked about.
Okay, so you never sought advice. You never sought advice from the previous chair who did.
I don't think that ever happened, no.
Okay, that's the answer. No, I never asked for it. That's what I need to know. I don't need to know all this other nonsense. What?
Counselor, we're going to be breaking in about a minute for the lieutenant.
Sure. When you and I spoke, you talked to me a little bit about the MASH beds and how that was something that you had used. And you implied that you had come up with that idea. But they've been used since 2016, and it's a requirement that they use. This isn't your idea. They're required to be used by the state. Because I you know how I feel about housing and everything. The only difference is that now they have to prove they're certified, but they are the only beds that we can use. So why are you taking credit for something that you didn't do?
So what I was indicating was that in 2020, during the pandemic, parole was able to contract with MASH.
They already had it. That's the only contract the state has.
So we contracted with them to ensure that there was an 8-week reduced fee for which an individual could seek shelter, and it would be paid for. So prior to any involvement with that contract, Individual.
Just interrupt you for a minute. We're going to have to break. So we're going to break until 1:30. You'll have 8 minutes left, 8.5 minutes left, Councilor Dodd.
Order, and I recognize Councilor Pereira for our prayer and pledge today.
Thank you, Governor. I want to keep in mind and pray for all the people that suffered the
Just a
devastating
minute, let me
consequences of Hurricane Ian down south. Thank you. Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation,
Under God, indivisible, with liberty,
justice.
for all.
Okay. I recognize Councilor DiPaolo for a motion to record advice and consent for the financial warrant.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye. And I recognize Councilor Kennedy for a motion to record advice and consent for the pending list of notaries public and justices of the peace.
So moved, Governor.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And we have a new nomination today. Michelle Kelly has been nominated to the position of Associate Justice of the District Court, and that's within your jurisdiction, Councilor Jubinville.
What do we have next week?
There were 3 on for the 12th, 3 on for the 19th, and 2 on for the 26th, 1 at 10 and 1 at 11:15. That could be a possibility.
Let me just wait on this. So I'll let the councilors know
Okay.
at the end of the day.
All right, very good. And we announced this morning that the governor has pardoned Kenneth Dunn, Stephen Joannis, Stephen Polidori, and Michael Picanso. And these decisions are subject to your advice and consent, and it will be up to you to decide how to contact the petitioners and how you want to vet them in this process. Okay, so that concludes our business today. I know you have a hearing underway, so yes.
Can I ask a question, Lieutenant Governor?
Sure.
So, I'm assuming we're gonna be doing the pardons the way we did them the last time we did them, which was 8 years ago. So if they live in the councilor's district, that councilor schedules the hearing for them.
You can do it that way, and we, I believe, have informed you where these individuals sort of fall
You did.
in that process.
Okay, and then we will
Share.
proceed and do, all right, perfect, thank you so much.
I'm going to suggest that the dean do the New Hampshire one. Second that.
I didn't hear that. I'm asking about New Hampshire. What was that now?
Yes,
Someone lives in New Hampshire.
I think the matter giving rise to the pardon occurred in Lowell. And so therefore,
Shouldn't it be with a?
But isn't he, excuse me, isn't that person connected with Chelmsford?
it's possible.
We can figure it
We can
out.
figure that out,
We'll
and
figure it out.
what makes sense. We can provide you with whatever information you need in order to make the decision about how to hear these matters. Okay,
Governor?
thank you. That concludes our business today.
Okay, so, I'm burying my time up. Let me ask you this. Do you agree with, Director O'Keefe of, Michelle Weatherby being a good hire? It's just a yes or no.
Yes, well, I didn't hire her, but yes, she does good work.
And, who would you recommend replace you as chair?
That is solely up to the governor.
I'm not asking you that. I'm asking you, who would you recommend?
I would say all the board members are very hardworking and there's a lot of good to choose from.
So you have no recommendation.
It's not my say.
So if the governor asked you, who would you say?
I would say any of the board members are very, very hard.
Colette Santa's qualified?
I think every board member is.
So you think Colette Santa, that's a yes. You think she's qualified. Did you hear her hearing?
I did watch the hearing after the fact.
And she hasn't passed the civil service exam? You think she's qualified? Oh, no, I think that was Weatherby. There's so many of them. Okay, so of the board members, who has the most parole failures or crimes committed on? The people that they paroled.
I don't understand the question.
People, so I'm a parole board member, I grant parole to somebody, members that grant parole. Of those 5 members, who has the highest recidivism rate?
You brought it downstairs?
I can't answer that because that's not something that we measure. When an individual's paroled, they're supervised by the field.
So you don't know when someone gets reincarcerated, that doesn't go into their file?
If they are revoked, we do know that.
So who has the highest rate?
It's not something that we track in that way, Counselor.
Do you think your morale is good at the board?
I think that people work very, very hard in a very difficult job. I think you'd probably have to ask people individually, how they feel about the jobs.
Well, I think people like their jobs, but I don't think that has anything to do with morale. You know, would you consider yourself a micromanager?
No.
Just think you're a hands-on manager? Okay, so, how many exit interviews have you held with people that have left?
I don't know, a few.
A few?
A few.
How many people have left the agency since you've been there?
I can't say.
Yes. Have you had a lot of turnover?
Had a lot of retirements.
Have you had early retirements? People before they've maxed out in their retirement, they haven't left?
Not that I can speak to, not that I can speak to.
How many, okay, when someone does retire, what's the process that happens under your leadership? Do you send them a letter of thanks? Do you take them out to lunch? Is there a party? What happens? And under your leadership?
I think it depends on what the person wants, because I've seen different things.
So you consult with them what they want?
No, I think they more just say what they would like. Some people like less pomp and circumstance, I guess, than others. Some people.
So do you ask them?
No.
No, so you don't ask them, you don't exit interview them. Do you send them a letter of thanks?
I've sent emails before people left.
But see, what I'm trying to get at, Attorney Moroney, is it's strongly felt that there is a favoritism that goes on under your watch, in that they have been told they can't send out an email saying retirement party for Joe Smith. That's the kibosh has been put on that. They're not allowed to do that anymore, which has demoralized people. And there's no logic to it. People who've been at institutions, wrapping up their work have been told they can't keep their laptops there and finish the work that day. They've got to come back. Oh, no, they can. They have to stay there. They can't bring the laptop home and finish it. But there's certain people who get special exemptions that can do that. There are some people, like Paulette Santos never sent to Suffolk County, you know, but you take other members of the board, you know, it's supposed to be regional. There's a reason for the regionality. There's a reason why it was set up that way. And it's just been thrown out the window, and nobody can explain except cross-training. But it appears to be punitive, because when I look at the schedules and the calendars, which are public record, and so if they're changed after the fact, I can also see that they've been changed. It's punitive. I mean, there's literally no explanation for it. And that is the pervasive feeling, and that's my issue with you. You've dodged questions with me today. You've deflected like this and that, and that's great. So that shows, you know, your skills that you learned in the courtroom. But this is about judgment. This is about how you treat people. And I mean, I have letters. I have a letter right here. The stuff people say, I've never heard anything like it. I mean, you know, Secretary Marty Walsh called me to talk about you because he knows your husband is lobbying for you on your behalf. And when I told him what you've done to people, and I haven't talked to the board members, I'm talking about, these are staff people. It's appalling. You took the grill away from them so they can't have their Friday afternoon barbecues? What was the point of that? It's cruel. It's punitive, and nobody understands it. I don't understand it, and that's what I'm asking you. Why do you do these things? Because that's a judgment call. That's how you treat people. And the lowest person is the person. The men who work in the yard that bring those prisoners in and out, their lives, they've done that work since they were 18 years old, many of them, since high school. You call them frat boys and you think they don't hear it? You don't think they don't know the disdain you have over and over and over vocalized for them? The rolling of the eyes, the sighs. Listen, Josh Wall had the same thing. I said to him, clearly nobody likes your face. And I made him explain it. But even when I talk to you on the phone, the sighing and everything, this is how people see you. This is management. This is leadership. And what I see from you is not your legal skill. That's not my issue. My issue is your complete disregard for the common man and woman that works at the parole agency. They can handle themselves. You know, they're all well paid. They're all doing really well. But there was a lifelong officer who died. There was no mental health care given to people. There was no let's take a day and talk about this. Business as usual. People were crushed. They were hurt. And I know I'm just speaking at you, but you don't have any answers for me. And it's why don't you take the glue away?
Councilor Duff,
Yeah.
your time is up.
Thank you, sir.
Councilor Kennedy.
I want to shift gears. I'd like to talk about your qualifications to be a district court judge as opposed to what goes on at the board. How many years were you a prosecutor?
18 and a half.
And how much of that time was spent in the district court?
3 years.
3 years? And how many trials would you say you did when you were in the district?
30, 31.
30 jury trials or 30 jury?
There were a few bench.
Huh?
There were a few bench. 30 jury trials, very few bench, 3 or 4.
That must have been a difficult courthouse for the defense bar if it was all bench, if it was all jury trials.
It was definitely mostly jury trials in the Dorchester District Court.
So you had 30 district court jury trials.
Yes.
And how many years did you spend in Superior Court?
10 and a half.
10 and a half? And how many Superior Court jury trials do you believe you
I
did?
believe it was 7.
7? Okay, so 37 jury trials. And approximately how many bench trials in your career you think? I couldn't count, but
It was just the 3 or 4 in district court. I did not have a bench trial in Superior.
and what you in the DA office?
In the district court, I was in the domestic violence court. And then in the Superior Court, I was first promoted to the domestic violence unit, which being the domestic violence and sexual assault unit. And then I was promoted in 2012 to the child protection unit, where I became the supervisor and then had a child protection caseload.
So basically, you were prosecuting cases of folks that allegedly abused children at that point?
Correct.
And I'm sure you dealt with a lot of victims of sexual abuse and other types of abuse in their families.
Absolutely.
That's pretty difficult to
It
do.
was extremely challenging.
Sure it was. With respect to, I'm just going to comment on your interaction with the defense bar, because you have a number of letters here, including from my friend Jack Collins, who's now a district court judge. He was a defense lawyer his whole career. In Dodge, where you were. Somebody I have a lot of respect for. I worked with him 45 years ago. As well as some other members of the defense bar that wrote letters on your behalf. How would you say you interacted with the defense bar when you were a prosecutor?
I think that I had an excellent relationship with the defense bar, both in the district court and the Superior Court. I always saw the defense bar as my colleagues, and thought that the best way to approach any case was in a working relationship with the defense attorney. Certainly everyone represented their own interests, but I had an excellent relationship with the defense bar.
Okay. And with respect to the fact that most of your career has been in law enforcement, somewhat law enforcement as well, and as a prosecutor, you know that when you become a judge, you can't be a prosecutor anymore, right?
Absolutely not.
And you can't be in law enforcement anymore, right? Now, you've been in court many times, and as myself, and Council Jubinville and Council Ferrara see all the time. We go into courts, and sometimes we get a judge that's pro-prosecution. Sometimes we get judges that tend to be pro-defendant, right? Where's Gloriann Moroney going?
It's going to be fair and listen to the evidence and listen to all sides.
It's all good. That's what everybody says. But when you get on the bench, you either lean towards the prosecution or you lean towards the defendant. Where are you going to be leaning?
Depends on what the evidence shows. And the Commonwealth meeting their burden.
That's what everybody says.
Doesn't meet their burden, then I'll be pro-defense.
That's fair enough. That's a fair answer. Okay. And I am gonna and I told you I would ask you this question when I talked to you on the phone about commutations. Why is it always at the end of a governor's term that we see these? Why aren't we seeing them along the way? Commutations, and especially pardons. Pardons are almost free. They don't mean a lot in terms of the world, right? You know, it's an individual. I think the ones that we got today, they're for things that happened 25, 30 years plus ago, right? Why do they have to wait that 7 years and 10 months before we see them? Why aren't they going through the parole board sooner? And I'm not just putting that on you. It was Governor Patrick did, I think, 3 or 4 pardons and 1 commutation in his 8 years. And that was a drug case. Governor Baker, to his credit, has done 2 commutations so far. The first one's for lifers in, I think, 30 years almost, or 26 years, I think it was.
5, I think.
And there's at least in the rumor mill that there might be another one coming, and I hope it is, you know. So he will have had done 3 lifer commutations when no governor's done them in 26 years. I mean, he's to be commended for that. But why aren't we seeing more earlier? What's the holdup?
All I can answer is from my time since I've been there. I can, statistics.
This is 2019, and you're the one that got the 3 through, hopefully 3 through. I'll give you your due there. But how about like before that? What do you think it is that we're not seeing at least pardons along the way? They don't. Are they addressed? Are they?
Again, I can only speak to my time, and I know when they started getting addressed. I know when I committed to processing them and getting them to the board after the new guidelines came out. That's
Questions I ask everybody. 58 days. It'll be used.
I think they can be. They should be sparing.
Are they overused? Not can be. Are they overused?
I think that they should be sparing. That's what I think. They should be used as a last resort.
I had a 54-year-old woman, and I was up with other people, who had an argument with her daughter about cleaning a room, turned into a shoving match. No record. Actually worked in someone's law office, a friend of mine's law office. She went into court on a Friday. They filed for 58A. What happens when they file? They're locked up.
They're held for 3 days.
She spent 5 days in jail on a case that was ultimately no pros. You think that should be happening?
No, I don't.
What are you going to do about it as the judge when you're in a situation like that and the prosecutor files that document?
I would ensure that the Commonwealth is ready to move forward on a 58A hearing. And in the event that there is a delay that is needed to obtain records or something to that effect, maybe the call is later on that day. Go make your call.
Put their feet to the fire? You do it that day? I hope you do, because I bring this up with everybody and nobody does. They have the attitude, the DA stands up and says, we're not ready yet. And then you come back 3 days later and they say, okay, here's the conditions we want. Or you come back 3 days later and they say, we're not going forward. Or you come back 3 days later, and it happened to me in Quincy last week, where they just put the police report in. Can't you do that day? And then they get out on condition. Why do people who've never been in jail before, in cases, a lot of them, you know, with your experience, a lot of the domestic just go away for one reason or another. Why are we putting people in jail?
It shouldn't be that way.
Yeah, and I hope you mean that, because I hope when you get on the bench, the knee jerk isn't, okay, put that on for next Tuesday, next case, because that's what happens. And what happens to judges, it happens to DAs, it happens to defense lawyers. We get callous to it. We don't realize the impact that incarceration like that has on people's lives, even for a short period of time. For people that are just regular people, not necessarily criminals, just going through life. Okay, I'm good. Any further questions? And I thank you for your testimony.
Councilor Paulo.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon. I will hopefully not repeat anything that my colleague Councilor Duff asked before I entered the room. We started a little earlier than this. So in the letter from Judge Garland, he writes, in part, it was my experience with Attorney Moroney that unprompted by the defense or the court, she would proactively provide all evidence that the Commonwealth intended to use at trial, which is what we'd expect, right? And that's good. He goes on to write, while that may seem like something that should happen routinely, it often did not. I assume he's saying that often the Commonwealth does not proactively offer evidence pertinent to the case. Is that an accurate assessment in your view?
That's his statement. So I'm assuming he had that experience with other prosecutors.
You've had plenty of experience in the courtroom. Councilor Kennedy just went over it. Is that your impression that often, this is a judge speaking, that often the Commonwealth does not proactively provide all evidence intended to use trial?
I wouldn't say often, but yes, it happens.
You've seen it happen. Have you heard of it happen?
I've heard of it happening.
And, but you've never seen it happen.
I can't recall. I can't recall. I know every
Judge Garland's mistaken that it happens often?
No, I'm sure that's his experience.
How are you going to handle that as a judge? Because it sounds like a judge is saying often the Commonwealth isn't proactive about sharing evidence. How are you going to handle that as a judge?
I think everyone needs to ensure that they are following all rules and obligations, regardless of what side.
Pretty obvious, right?
It is
Obvious. So how will you deal with it though as a judge? What will you do?
Well, it depends on what is brought to my attention. I mean,
But that's the whole point, is not everything is potentially brought to your attention. So what will you do to make sure things are brought to your attention?
That's definitely something that I can address with the parties before me. Has all discovery been provided? Has all information been exchanged? And ensure that both parties are being held to their obligations. Perhaps it's something pre-trial or something that I can put on the record.
Okay, and so how would you find, I mean, how would you find out? Do prosecutors develop reputations for doing things like that?
I think every practitioner develops a reputation.
So how would you treat it differently when the person with that reputation is before you? Is there a higher standard?
I would always be fair and impartial, and I wouldn't let reputations necessarily get in the way. I would be fair and impartial with every case, with every person, and not rush to judgment.
Okay. So in thinking about being fair and impartial and exercising your discretion, you write in your application that again, the boilerplate, it's good, it's important. Judges make decisions on a case-by-case basis, taking into consideration the facts of the case, but also looking at criminal history and background of the defendant, victim impact, and mitigating factors such as mental health. So let's go through that. These are things you think about in your discretion. How does criminal history impact the way you would exercise your discretion as a judge?
Every case that would come before me would, of course, start with the facts and circumstances of a case, but
So how would you handle criminal history in exercising?
someone's board of probation record.
Okay, and is there a statutory imperative to consider criminal history when crafting a sentence?
Well,
Disposition?
it depends on would I consult with the sentencing guidelines? Maybe I would, maybe I wouldn't. They're not mandatory, but it's something that I could consult with, and that certainly requires looking at criminal history.
Why does it require that? It doesn't require it, as you said, they're recommended. There's no requirement as far as, unless the habitual criminal statute, which is its own separate thing. So why would criminal history play a role in your discretion?
Because I think it's important to know what someone's history is specifically.
Even when they're before you for a particular crime, it's important for you to know what happened 10 years ago?
If it shows a substance abuse history, what if?
I don't know. What happened? What if it does?
I think that that's very telling to me. I think that
What does it tell you?
helps me to know the full story of the individual's history.
How about victim impact? How does that impact your discretion? How does the way that a victim perceived or experienced a crime impact discretion of a judge?
The victim has to be heard. If there is a victim, they have.
So they're heard. I completely agree. Victims have a right to be heard. How does it impact the judge's discretion? I completely agree. Victims have the right to be heard. How does it impact the discretion that the judge exercises?
Again, it's a totality of the entire circumstance and the.
But within the totality, if the
Can't give you-
victim's statement, you can't possibly say how a victim's statement would impact your discretion?
It depends on the.
So you can't say.
Depends on the position, it depends on the case.
Give me an example of how a victim impact statement would impact your discretion as a judge.
Perhaps a victim is talking about their level of fear or lack thereof. Perhaps the victim is telling me, say it's, if you want an example, a domestic violence case where the victim wants to reconcile with the partner who's also the defendant, that impact statement is very important to me because I want.
That's a tough one, right? Because often victims feel very real pressure in a domestic violence situation to say that they do want the person.
100%. But
But that impacts you, so how do you factor that?
it could possibly.
It could possibly impact your discretion.
It would be a variable.
The Deputy Commissioner of Programs for the Massachusetts Probation Service wrote a letter. He wrote that there was a tremendous effort in spring of 2020 to limit incarcerated population to prevent the spread of COVID in correctional facilities. What were some of the tremendous efforts that happened to limit incarcerated population during COVID?
I think what Mr. Coelho is speaking of is the partnership that came out of COVID, which started with the question that Counselor Duff was asking me in regards to the MASH contract. After parole was able to fund that contract for a limited period of time with a limited budget, that contract, we were able to continue with the help and funding of probation. So we collaborated on that.
Okay. Do you believe in the unfettered access to reproductive health, including the right to terminate a pregnancy?
Sorry, repeat the question.
Do you believe in unfettered access to reproductive health, including the right to terminate a pregnancy?
Yes, I do.
You indicated, I believe, I want to make sure I have this right, that about 330, the number isn't important, petitions for commutations and pardons,
Correct.
and that they were all reviewed by the entire board in order to determine whether to grant a hearing or not.
Correct.
And what was the timeline of that happening? Because there was a backlog. I know this has come up, but to make a point of it, what was the timeline of that when that started to be ramped up?
When did we start reviewing them to determine if a hearing was going to be given?
Yeah, because obviously it accelerated, right? Because
Yes.
there was the backlog, and then, so when did that start?
I believe it was the summer of 2020.
Okay, and as you said, that was following the governor's release of the clemency guidelines. Did the governor have previous guidelines in place that were superseded?
Yes.
And in the governor's guidelines, the governor or the writer of the document writes that commutations are intended to serve as a strong motivation for confined persons to utilize available resources for self-development and self-improvement as an incentive for them to become law-abiding citizens and return to society. So do you feel that that incentive is being met with 4 commutation hearings granted out of hundreds?
I do. I feel like, yes.
Okay, so you feel, because I've had conversations with folks who've applied for commutations, and they feel pretty hopeless. It's kind of useless, because until very recently, there weren't any, which I understand you've accelerated. So I just hear wildly different experiences on that. So in your time as general counsel and chair of the parole board, was the parole board subject to lawsuits during that time?
Yes.
And were any of the lawsuits on the subject of mental health services?
Mental health services from.
Correct. We can leave it broad like that, right?
Okay. Yes, I would say mental health would have been the subject of a couple, yes.
You would, it is, it was the subject.
Yes.
And so, is that a pervasive problem in our correction system? Mental health and criminal system?
Yes, I would say work needs to be done.
So what did you do as chair in that regard? Did you meet with the commissioner of mental health at any point?
As far as mental health, one thing that
Did you ever meet with the commissioner of mental health in your time as chair?
mental health, I don't think I have. I think
you know
I'm
who it
the
is?
general counsel there.
Okay, do you know who it is?
No, I do not. During my time as chair, I did implement a policy to ensure that individuals who had mental health issues were referred for counsel, and that is something that has been happening since 2016.
Okay, and yet the lawsuits continue nonetheless. Are there actions
There's always lawsuits.
happening internally to address any of that?
We're constantly working to ensure that we get.
Since 2016, and then what's ramped up? Because we ramped up commutations in 2020. Like what else has ramped up since 2016 is what, 6 years ago?
What other improvements have been made
Yeah.
in the agency?
Yep, regarding mental health specifically.
Regarding mental health specifically, we're constantly collaborating with other agencies. We are doing a lot of work with the BHJI project. So we're able to collaborate with many, many different agencies to ensure when individuals are released, that they are put with individuals through the work of a navigator that can help them to access resources in the community.
That's a good example. So the Commission on Structural Racism in the Parole Process that the legislature recently completed and submitted a report on.
Yes.
Was that report shared with the parole board? The recommendations of that report?
The report is online and.
Was the report shared with the parole board members
No,
specifically?
I didn't.
It was not.
I didn't.
Did you think it should have been, or what was your reaction when the legislature put together this commission that took months, and I attended several of the online hearings? Why shouldn't it have been shared with the parole board?
Everyone knew it was available online. I did not do that, no.
Okay.
Everyone knew it was available.
Everyone knew it was available. When did they know? How do you know that? When did they become aware that it was available?
It was someone in the office who told me it was up online, actually.
How do you know the other board members?
And then,
So you don't know that the other board members were aware?
no, I do because I mentioned it to them in session and it was mentioned at a manager's meeting, so
Okay,
it's,
how long after the report came out did that happen?
no.
Okay. Did you find any of the recommendations, and a lot of them spoke to legislative needs, did you find any of the recommendations compelling or interesting?
I did.
And what specifically, what's an example of that?
One of the things that I've been working towards for a long time, and it was included in their recommendations, was ensuring that all parole hearings get recorded. It is something that will promote transparency amongst the people that come before the board, the people that work at the board. I think it's a really important initiative, and it's something that we are doing.
Okay. Who made the hire decision to hire Michelle Weatherby?
Well, then Chair, now Judge Treston.
Judge Trustin. And has she been promoted since her initial hire by?
She was hired as the deputy by Paul Tressler and then promoted to the chief by Paul Tressler.
Paul Tressler also made it. Well, how would you describe the morale of the parole department?
I think people do their very best to do a very difficult job in a very, very difficult, high-pressured.
I agree. Why do I get so many phone calls from people literally in tears regarding the toxic nature of the employment atmosphere?
I can't speak to anonymous calls or complaints. All I can say, Counselor, is that it is a very, very difficult and important job with massive responsibility. I have done my very, very best to aid the agency, and
My concern is really about, when I think about the courthouse and I think about, actually, I won't bother with that. At a recent hearing, we reappointed Colette Santa to the parole board. We saw that she had an exorbitantly higher, it was exorbitantly higher parole rate than the other board members in regard to corrections hearings. It was about 90%, 92%. I don't have the number in front of me. The average of the others was around 60. That seemed really high to me. And hilariously, I'm accused of wanting all the prisoners out. That seems way too high to me. Because what I know about our jail system is, as much as I have issues with racial disparities, some other crimes, we do a pretty good job in Massachusetts overall incarceration rate. And so the incarcerated population has gotten more and more concentrated on folks that need to be removed from society. And yet a 90% parole rate compared to 60% for the others. And I heard that the newest member has 100% parole rate so far. Is that accurate?
Excuse me, Counselor.
I'm concerned about public safety and the way some of the parole board members are releasing people into the community against the recommendations of risk and need assessments of the actual experts. That's why we shouldn't have folks who have no clue about criminal justice or mental health on the parole board. Thank you for your time. Thanks for
Thank you.
letting me finish.
Counselor Ferrera.
Is Councilor Hurley online?
Oh, I'm sorry, Counselor Hurley, you on the screen up there?
I am. I've been listening to every word.
Okay, you speak.
I shall. Couple of things. On page 7 of your application, you, in answer to question 44, what percentage of your practice has been in the Massachusetts court system with approximate percentage of time that you spent in each of the following courts? Superior Court, 75%, District Court, 25%, Boston Municipal Court, 5%. That's 105%. I'm frozen.
You're not frozen.
can you hear me, Counselor?
I can hear you now.
Sorry, I apologize. I must have made a little typographical error on, are you looking at my application or the questionnaire?
The application. It's 105. All right.
Okay.
So,
Thank you. I apologize. I must have had a typographical error.
okay, so how much did you practice in Boston Municipal Court?
It was very brief. It was when cases from the Dorchester District Court were transferred to the Boston Municipal Court.
They were Dorchester cases.
They were Dorchester cases.
Okay, that was my only question on that issue. It seems to me that what's happened here today is all these people that have gotten up in opposition to your nomination want to punish you for what's been going on in the parole board for a long time before you got there, when it was Chairman Treschler. And it seems to me that Chairman Treschler got off easy with the little that he did, apparently, more or less not being brought to the front like it is now. So you took over in January of 19, you were a parole board member. In April of 19, you became chairperson. So what impact did the COVID issue have on your ability to, from April to when everything got shut down, which I think was in March of 20? Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, so what effect did the whole COVID issue have on your ability to straighten things out in that position as the chairperson?
So as you pointed out, Counselor, in 2019 in April, I became chair, and, you know, my first goal was to ensure that the commutations got addressed. So that's where I started. However, as you pointed out, in trying to ensure that the agency was running properly and addressing the backlog of commutations in March of 2020, things came to a screaming halt, but only for about a day. I was able to quickly implement virtual hearings, which the agency had never done before, and not being a tech person, there were certainly some challenges, but was able to quickly implement virtual hearings to the point where individuals did not experience a delay due to COVID in getting to see the board. We were able to do that for 18 months before slowly returning back to in-person hearings. Certainly that was always the preference. During that time, in addition to conducting virtual hearings, we began conducting commutation hearings to try and reduce that backlog. In addition to that, to ensure that people were getting released as quickly as possible. We weren't able to change the legal standard in any way, but we were able to ensure that people, when they did get out, they were getting out quickly. We reduced the time period in which we were investigating home plans and made sure that people were getting out as expeditiously as possible. And in addition, I did mention the home plan initiative to ensure that when people were getting released, they had a solid home to go to that was paid for up to 8 weeks by the Commonwealth.
As far as the allegations about the things that you did in terms of taking away the grill and issues concerning morale, what was your feeling about those issues and the accusations?
As far as the grill, last I knew, it didn't work. But that said, you know, this is as I said before, and I don't mean to repeat myself, parole is a very, very, it's challenging work, it's serious work, and it's a massive responsibility. You know, I take that responsibility very seriously, and I always have. So when it comes to things like, you know, emails and things like that, they are certainly able to be sent through a supervisor rather than, you know, using Commonwealth time and Commonwealth property to be advertising parties and things of that nature. So unfortunately, it is a very, very challenging job, a very serious responsibility, and I always took that responsibility seriously.
So you did nothing to actively prevent people from using the grill?
No.
Okay, all right. It seems to me that all the folks that spoke against you getting this job had no idea of what your background was in terms of your being a litigator for the district attorney's office, both in district and superior court, as well as being a litigator in civil matters while you were in the role of counsel for the parole board, and even after that. And I believe that they're more or less using you as a whipping boy, girl, person, for their dissatisfaction with what's been going on for a lot longer than you had responsibility for. And in essence, while you were there, you came up against the COVID-19 wall, which knocked everybody for a loop and had to reinvent how they provided services, how they did their job, and how they could still be active in performing the duties that were incumbent upon them. And it seems to me if they're that unhappy with you, they should have all been testifying about how great it would be to have you out of there. And I think you got left holding the bag, quite honestly. That being said, as Councilor Kennedy pointed out and stole a lot of my questions, you do have the qualifications to be a district court judge. And so I will leave it at that. I thank you for the time that we spent together on the phone, and I also thank Councilor Ferraro for remembering that I was here, and I will turn over the rest of my time to Councilor Ferraro if he needs it.
Thank you, Counselor.
Thank you, Councilor Hurley. Councilor Ferraro, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Councilor Hurley, for rendering the rest of your time. So I got a lot of calls, and it was kind of almost funny because every call started off with, I know her husband Greg and he's a great guy. And I said, well, I want to know about her because everyone thinks Greg's a great guy. So I am so thankful that we got together for 4 hours this week and that you took your time to drive to Fall River, Massachusetts to meet with me so that I could get to learn about you and your qualifications to be a district court judge. And I had some concerns and I had a lot of questions for you, and you answered them, in my opinion, very honestly. Every time we have a parole hearing, a parole board member hearing, it's hard to wrap your arms around it because, again, equal letter last time with Colette, you had an equal stack of for, an equal stack of against, and I think you guys have a very, very challenging job, and you just can't win. You're going to make some people happy, you're going to make some people unhappy with every decision you make, and those are hundreds a week. But looking at your credentials for the job, I think you're extremely qualified with all the trials you had, the cases that you did, and I talked to you as somebody who did 30 years in law enforcement, the sensitive nature of the case you did for domestic violence, child rape cases that you brought to trial, and did so very successfully. And then you served as legal counsel to the parole board, and you didn't put in for the judgeship right away, which is to your credit because you wanted to do some more with parole and make a difference. And we talked last night about, did you make a difference and how tough was it with setting up programs for reentry? And can you just talk about that a little bit, like what happened during COVID and what happened to those programs and if they're okay now?
Absolutely. What's funny is that from the biggest challenge, which was COVID, came some really, really great steps forward for parole. And, I did talk about the sober home initiative, and I don't mean to beat it to death, but at the same time, 1,000 people coming out of incarceration, being able to have a safe place to go where they don't have to worry about how they're going to pay for it because they have no money coming from the inside. That was huge. And that's about 1,000 people between the Sober Home Project and then the placement in transitional housing. That is still going on. And I hope everything is going to get put into ensuring that that continues to go on. I mentioned earlier the BHJI project, Behavioral Health for Justice Involved Individuals. It started with 2 jurisdictions. That too during COVID has grown statewide, and that allows individuals, it's not a condition of parole, but it is another avenue where individuals can get that partnership and that direction when they need help, especially when it comes to getting set up with clinicians. For a long time, people were getting out, and the only help that they can get, something better than nothing, but the only help they could get were virtual hearings, virtual meetings with clinicians. Now, with that project up and running, we're able to get people directed towards better programming when it comes to mental health treatment and also substance abuse treatment. As Councilor Jubinville mentioned, there was a letter from John McGann from Gavin Foundation. We've made tremendous relationships, and Gavin Foundation is a leader as far as helping individuals, substance use disorder, especially individuals coming out of incarceration. So that's yet again another partnership that will absolutely keep on going and will make an impact going forward.
I don't know anyone that I've interviewed who wants to be on the parole board doesn't think that good people deserve a break and the real bad guys need to stay in jail. Would you agree with me?
Well, I think that incarceration serves a purpose. And when it comes to sentencing, incarceration does indeed serve a purpose. But then the problem becomes if enough programming isn't provided on the inside, that individual, unless they're serving a life sentence, will get released. And then how successful are they going to be if they're not ready to be released? If they haven't had adequate programming on the inside, if they have been unable to reach that level of parole eligibility, that's a concern. They're not going to be successful. They are going to reoffend and they're going to come back, and nobody wants to see that.
Do you think we track the recidivism rate enough, or, well, I guess that's the first question. Do you think that it's tracked properly?
I think it needs to get better, and I think that there's a lot of initiatives in place for that to happen. There's cross data collection amongst all criminal justice agencies that is in the middle of happening right now. I think that will make us all better and held to task a little bit better. It's better than it was, but there's improvement to be made.
And I wonder, and I've talked about it with other people on the board, about if you get arrested and you're doing time in Worcester County or Hampden County or Bristol County, you're afforded different programs. Is that correct?
Yes, different.
So, so sometimes people try to peg and go, oh, she had this, release rate. He had that release rate. They have this much recidivism rate. A lot of it depends on the programming in individual jails, as well as who your parole officer is and how they gauge whether or not you violated. Is that correct?
All those are variables, yes.
Those are variables. It's hard for me to put my arms around it sometimes when I go, oh, this person had 100%, 98%, and this person had 52%. But, who's doing the better job? I'm saying there's so many variables. It's hard you can't put your finger on it, I don't think.
It's very difficult to track, especially when once an individual is released, the parole board members vote. And it could be 1 member, it could be 3 if there's a panel, or it could be 7 if it was a full board. Then the individual goes out into the community and is supervised by a parole officer, which that person has to ensure that the conditions are being followed and things of that nature.
So, yeah, for every person before us on the parole board, I've heard the gamut. They have too many restrictions. They have too few conditions. They have too few releases. They get too many releases. So God bless you for doing that job. Even for just a few years. I wouldn't want to do it for a day. But the qualifications to be a judge are what we're here to talk about today. And I think the other councils spoke about that. And I really appreciate you spending time with me this week and all your credentials and all your service to the Commonwealth.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Council.
Do you know why some defense lawyers don't do jury waived trials in front of certain judges?
An idea.
It's that idea.
Think maybe the result is concerning to them, maybe based on reputation or track record.
Excuse me. Go ahead. Okay, okay. So there are judges in this Commonwealth who have never said the word not in front of guilty since they've been on the bench. So why would any lawyer caring about a client jury waive a case in front of a judge who never says not guilty?
Imagine they would.
So what is sad to me is the fact that some judges spend their entire career and no one jury waives in front of them. What an awful legacy for a judge who's supposed to be fair. That most in the defense bar and some DAs will tell you, do not jury waive in front of this judge. What an awful legacy that is for a career. So we don't want that to happen to you. You can't get fired for saying not guilty.
Absolutely not.
In fact, I think there's two ways to look at cases. One is, if you're a government judge, you look for every way you can to substantiate the government's case. If you're somebody who I think is fair, you look, since the burden is on the Commonwealth to convince you beyond a reasonable doubt, you look for reasonable doubt in the case. Is there reasonable doubt in this case? If there is, and I get that it is, there is, they haven't sustained their burden. So what we don't want to hear is 2 years from now when I walk into a court and somebody said, did you vote for that judge? I say, yeah, what's up? Can't jury waive with her? Government judge?
That.
Okay. And there, I asked it earlier, a client, but there are courts, in some courts, few courts, that if your case is on for a trial, you show up that day and you and the DA come to an agreement, they will not let you plea. The judge would not let you plea.
Trial.
On day of trial. So I often know, I think of what I would do if I was told that by a judge, and I think I'd say, well, here to plea, he has a right to plea from arraignment till a jury comes in with a verdict. We're pleading. Not going to trial, we're pleading. I don't know what a judge, one of these judges that are doing that will say. They'll say, you got to go to trial. And I'll say, I don't have to go to trial. My client doesn't have to go.
Absolutely not.
So anyway, and the chief judge in the courthouse can't tell you how to run your court. You're free to do it any way you want. So you got to be bold. The people are paying you all this good money to be a judge. We got to take care of people in the county. Okay? Thank you for your, yes.
The rest of my time.
Yes.
I'm going to use the rest of the time that I get. Have you sent Tom Schoolcraft's recommendation, party recommendation to the governor? Why not?
Not ready yet.
It's not ready? What is not ready about it?
It's not completed.
Meaning, can you tell me what that means?
The recommendation.
Does that, this isn't a trick. Does that mean it's not written?
It's in process.
But he has been, you are recommending him.
I think it's in process and it should be forthcoming.
To the governor's office. Okay. So he is being recommended to the governor's office. It has not been done yet. That was the answer to the question. One other question I have, the pay for the parole board members is in statute. meaning it's law.
Yes.
Why was Colette Santa paid $13,000 more than every other board member, particularly those like Tina Hurley, who has an extraordinary amount of experience for over 2 years? And who pays that money back to the Commonwealth since she was overpaid?
It was a one-time stipend for work on the ACA accreditation.
It was a stipend. So she's taken extra time off from work. Now, Kevin Keefe said she only took 2 days a year. That's not what the calendar reflects. But she has a $13,000 stipend for 2 years to do 2 days of work.
I don't know what the exact amount is.
Well, that's what he told us. I mean, he was adamant about it.
But it was for ACA, yes.
2 days work. So she got 13,000. And how was she, the least experienced person on the board, how was she selected for that?
She was ACA, the ACA liaison when she was chief of transitional services. She just maintained it when she got on the parole board.
Thank you. Counselor,
Yeah, I apologize, Mr. Chair. I had one question I forgot to ask. Is it true that you've had to recuse yourself as a parole board member for certain hearings?
Yes,
What percentage would you say that is approximately?
I don't know.
10, 90, 50?
I don't know.
Is it more than 10?
Yes, yes.
Why were you in a position to recuse yourself in those instances?
I'm assuming you're talking about the Boston police cases. It was said earlier Suffolk, that is not accurate because Suffolk County encompasses other areas that don't have to do with the recusal. I recused myself from cases in which Boston police was involved.
Okay. So would that be also protocol for you were you to take the bench?
No, it was done pursuant to a request by Attorney Gloriann
What was the request?
to recuse myself from the case that she was working on in all cases where the Boston police was opposing parole.
Did you disagree with that assessment? Attorney Gloriann has the power to tell the parole board what to do. That's awesome. She decided that you should recuse yourself, and so the parole board adopted that policy?
She didn't decide, she requested it. I reviewed the request after reviewing the request.
So you
Out of an abundance of caution and to reduce any concern
Right.
or appearance of conflict, I recused myself.
That's admirable. So why wouldn't that apply if you're a judge?
The request was done solely based on the fact that my husband was acting commissioner. He is no longer.
meeting is adjourned.